Hey everyone, this is Jack from the Cardboard Herald, and today we are doing a spoiler-free review of Funny Pages of the latest Mystery in a Box from Enigma Emporium. Enigma has a couple games under their belt, including Carte Rouge, which we've covered on this channel in the past. And this one is themed around My Old Bay comic strips from the newspaper. You know, what we had before memes. So ostensibly, the setup is that the editor of a newspaper, for all intents and purposes, our narrator, is contacting us to solve a cold yet still open case of the disappearance of a long-standing illustrator and author behind the comic strip Square Peg Round Hole, which evokes single panel strips like The Far Side or Family Circus, though I would say that in humor it is not nearly as obscure or esoteric as The Far Side, but there is a sort of tonal commonality that it has with Gary Larson's Far Side strip, my personal favorite as a child. See, the Far Side was very esoteric. It was very cryptic and enigmatic. Gary Larson didn't shy away from shoving as much niche academia into that comic as possible, and it felt like you sometimes had to work for the joke. Like you were part of a fraternity if you were able to figure it out, especially at a young age, and like you were, you know, the keeper of some sort of forbidden, stupidly silly knowledge. And even if this doesn't quite hit the high level of humor, the non sequiturs that I so loved, the comics within do hold a lot of information, and like you feel like if you just dig deep into it, you're going to get all of the secrets of the universe. But that's not that different from what you expect out of Mysteries in a Box, right? You know, you expect to get one of these games, you open it up, and one puzzle is going to lead to another, and there's all kinds of cryptic stuff, and the clocks on the wall, and the atomic numbers listed on the scale, whatever it is, all that kind of stuff is in here, but what makes it different is both the medium, in that you have these 28 beautifully illustrated and gorgeously printed pages, and the fact that it is so incredibly freeform. Like, this isn't something where you start with a foundation of a couple puzzles and that leads into another that are based off of certain knowledge that you've gleaned from previous ones. You're just given these 28 strips and said, have at it. Go for it, sucker. Figure out how all these are going to relate to one another and the order in which that they should have been printed in February of whatever year this was meant to be printed. And if you do that, the editor believes that you're going to be able to figure out what happened to Stephen Kelly, the author behind Square Peg Round Hole. So you have your setup. And, you know, the medium makes it different. The free form makes it different. But the other thing that I found really fascinating and lovely about this game, probably the biggest highlight that I can think of, the most acclaim that I can give to Funny Pages, is that traditionally the creators of these types of games have struggled with making these accessible to people, right? Because you want to have it be a series of puzzles that are truly insidious, that they're infuriating at times to have to solve, but at the same time you want to put people in the mental headspace and know what counts as too far out there and what is kind of the focus that you should be trading within. And they do this beautifully through a narrative setup. The editor contacted you in the first place because he discovered in looking at some of the old strips that there was secret information hidden within. And the tutorial to the game is a step-by-step walkthrough of his process of solving everything having to do with 3 dummy tutorial strips. And it's amazing because he goes through all of his follies, all of his struggles, all of his assumptions, and the solutions that led to what ended up being the definitive answer for those 3 strips. And by doing this, by having the entire process of the narrator, and by that I mean the designers of the game, walking through the individual steps involved, you start to glean what is fair game as far as information, what sorts of details you should be looking for without spoiling anything in the actual comics themselves. Now, getting into some more of the puzzles, because again, I don't want to spoil any of this. This is secret information. This is for you to figure out. I did find it pretty challenging, but the most challenging thing about it that ever veered into frustration territory was the open-ended nature for me. I'm no puzzle master. I mean, I've played my share of puzzle games. I've done the Sherlock Holmes thing. I've played plenty mystery escape room in a box things. I've read my fair share of Graham Bass books, but nonetheless, I crave structure. I want to feel like I'm being fed enough information that I'm going down the right path. And while you do start seeing, oh yes, of course, this must be the solution here for individual puzzles, the sandbox is so freeform that for some people, I imagine it's going to be exhilarating. But for me, it was just like, oh man, what do I even contend with here? How do I structure my approach to this thing and feel like I'm going about this in a logical progression? In order to assist with that, we just set up a system in which we would leave one of these out on a daily basis and just say, all right, what can we figure out on this one? And if we get to a stopping point, we go on to the next one. And we start to carve through it. But with 28 seemingly individual, unconnected mysteries that we know are plugging back together into one overall oeuvre, one overall completed tapestry, that is a lot of content to have to deal with. But the act of working through one at a time is satisfying in and of itself. Aesthetically, I think this knocks it out of the park. I did say earlier that it didn't hit the high points of The Far Side, but hey, what does? It still totally looks as though these were strips that could have been in syndication in 1992 during the heyday of comic strips in the newspaper. And the illustrations are so vibrant and interesting to look at that even as centerpieces, almost like a coffee table book, this feels like a package out of time that is preserving the essence, the spiritual embodiment of something that's a bit ephemeral, that's kind of gone, this type of humor, this type of look, this type of aesthetic. So as a game, Funny Pages is pretty good. It's not my favorite mystery in a box that I've ever played, but the setting, the execution of it is incredibly exciting, and the accessibility, the desire to frame these things in such a way that makes them more penetrable and more transparent to the person taking on one of these is such a welcome advancement in this genre. And yeah, the open-ended sandbox nature is going to chafe for some people, just like it did for me. But if you're willing to put in the work, just like the Gary Larson comics that I was referencing earlier, then that can make the fun itself more rewarding. And that's up to you to decide if that's worth it for you. And that's our review. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald. If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.